Welcome, Carolina. It's a pleasure to have you here. How are you?
I'm doing great, and you, Simona. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. I want you to start by asking you to briefly introduce yourself and share what led you to focus on crowdfunding as a tool to support sustainable fashion projects.
Excellent. Thank you very much for this question. And so, first of all, I wanted to say that it's a great opportunity to speak about this for future fashion professionals, entrepreneurs. And I am an assistant professor in cultural economics and cultural organizations at Erasmus University in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. And I focus my research mostly on funding and financing forms for the arts, for fashion included, but mostly creative industries in general, of which fashion is part of it. And the reason why I focused one of my previous research in crowdfunding for sustainable fashion is because I was interested in finding out whether the component of sustainability and innovation, when they are present in a campaign, whether they make any difference. People donate more, if there is any consequence for the markets, if fashion projects are more successful when they include this the innovation and the sustainability component. So me and my co-authors, which are Alina Pavlova, Nadia Pisana, Mariangela Lavanga, we have drawn a large data set from Kickstarter only on fashion crowdfunding projects to find out a few things. And so, going back to your main question, the motivation was basically, on the one hand, advance a topic that is overlooked in the literature, and on the other hand, contribute to entrepreneurs that would find in this study reasonable ideas to pursue their own projects, so that we could help them, basically.
Thank you. Um, so, crowdfunding is maybe a powerful tool to fund project related to creativity, but also with a sustainable aspect. But let's start with the basics. Could you explain what crowdfunding is and how it works, in
Mhm.
particular in the context of sustainable fashion?
Yeah, perfect. So crowdfunding, very basically, it's a funding tool mechanism. It's technically called what we say, it's a two-sided market, whereas you have the donor and you have the project creator, and the intermediary is the platform in between, connecting these two parts. That's why we call it a two-sided market. One of them pays, the other one benefits. Um, what is interesting about crowdfunding is that since 2012 it became widely used and known by culture and creative sectors, the arts, as a way to solve a funding gap. Right, not all projects in the culture and creative sectors access money, and they found in that format a way to have quick money, generate funds for startup ideas, for initial projects, and that got me fascinated by them. um, so, to say very, very concisely, crowdfunding is a funding tool for whichever project, whichever entrepreneur willing to create a project that needs quick funding, quick money, outside of traditional funding schemes. Like, compared to funding from the bank, crowdfunding is much faster. Compared with venture capital, crowdfunding is certainly easier to access, because you don't depend on an existing network and you don't have to be extremely rich to access it. So, crowdfunding is this easy, open way to access people, demand, consumers that might be already interested in your brand, or might want to support this project and see it coming about. Uh, Now, what is crowdfunding in fashion? Well, what we see mostly in fashion crowdfunding is that it has been widely used to create, like, apparels, designer brands, gadgets. You can think of, for example, backpacks that are interesting, that have a different, how do you say, usability. So usually those are things that have a different user experience, that have something new to the consumer. In fashion crowdfunding projects, we saw a lot of, for example, enamel pins, which was a funny finding. um, Animal pins are just like buttons that you can put on your backpack or you can put in your clothing to represent identity and such. You would have a lot of t-shirts, you would have different projects that in one way or another related to fashion, but I have to say that they were not what we call high fashion brands, right? Mostly they are individual beginner entrepreneurs trying to find potential consumers to their ideas, but those are not, we're not talking about brands like Prada, very widely known brands of that we call luxury. So mostly fashion crowdfunding has been used for simpler types of projects, but they have clear completion, they have a clear objective.
Very interesting. And I think it's also a way for independent producer to reach the market without entering the regular market. It's an easier way,
Yeah,
isn't it?
absolutely. Absolutely. You're very right. So, crowdfunding is a way to test the demand, to find a way to get to know your potential consumers. What do they like? What do they don't like? What kind of projects do they relate to? If you offer a project, if you offer, for example, a fashion apparel with a lot of colors, would people like it? If you offer in another way, would they like it or not? So it's a cheap way to test the demand, which otherwise it would have been harder. And the reason for that is because up until the project receives funding, you're still testing in the market and looking whether people will donate and support this project, will pre-buy your product, etc. So in a way, the money that has been put in the crowdfunding project will be kept until the goal is reached. And only when the goal is reached, you will receive this amount of money and will create a project and continue that project. And this is very important because it means that you can have a clear way to test the market before doing any investments. And let's say if crowdfunding wasn't there, you literally have to open a shop or produce a product and actually sell it and test it while selling it. And this is extremely costly. So with crowdfunding, you can reduce the cost of that initial project to find out whether consumers might like it.
Yeah, it's almost a zero risk way of test your product because in the worst scenario your campaign doesn't work and you just don't reach the target, isn't it?
Exactly. In the worst case scenario, the project just fails and you don't receive the money, but also you haven't invested money to make it work. So usually, the most successful crowdfunding projects would have a prototype only, only one edition of the thing they want to sell, which we call it a prototype, so that you can show people that this has potential and has a clear product in mind. But you're very right. It means that the risks to create a project or to create a new idea are much reduced. Now, one important thing to say is that it doesn't mean there is zero risks totally, and it's because what we also have seen in another work we've done, another research, is that especially for artists, they rely a lot in their local community, in their local social network. And if you create a project and you are unsuccessful, that might also give a bad signaling to you later on. For example, you would be marked as, well, you did one, two, three crowdfunding projects that have always been unsuccessful. Well, that shows something bad about your product or about yourself too. So there are risks implied how will people look at it, how yourself as an entrepreneur will see that. But those risks are not purely financial ones. Those are more recognition, status, and reputation risks rather than money wise.
Sure, this is something to take in
To bear in
consideration.
mind, it's something to take in consideration. And I would suggest, since we're also addressing people that might want to do a crowdfunding project one day, usually for starters, for people that don't know the system very well or have an idea that they really don't know if people will like it or not, it's best to start with lower target goals, because you need to be sure that you might reach it, um, and there is sufficient social network around you or that can start supporting this project online, so that you can gather some momentum. But if that doesn't happen, it becomes very difficult. The project might not take off. So there's a sweet spot between not putting a very low target goal, not low to that doesn't cover the cost of creation, but also not that high that signals you're never going to make it because it's just too high, and then people won't support. So there's this in between, which, to be honest, is quite difficult to find out. I would say it's project by project.
Sure. And related to this, based on your research, what are the key factors that contribute to success of fashion crowdfunding campaigns? Could you just explain how innovation, product life cycle, and sustainability play a role in this success?
Yeah, right. So the main focus of that study was finding out whether sustainability and innovation play a role in crowdfunding. And we added a few extra items like life cycle, which I'm going to explain in a minute. But how does innovation, product life cycle, and sustainability play a role? Well, to be very direct, if the project has any innovative component, the chances of reaching success are much higher than the projects that are not innovative. That being said, it means innovation can be two different things. It can be either a totally new product, like something that does not exist in the market at all, or it could be an incremental innovation, something really tiny, like a new form of animal pin, like a new idea that is justified by the entrepreneur. How does this become visible in a crowdfunding project? Basically, it becomes visible through the text, through the videos, through the images that they portray in the crowdfunding project. Innovation here, in most of our cases, mean more an incremental addition to existing clothing apparel. So, for example, you would have clothing made out of bamboo that would be better for runners, or you would have an animal pin that has a different format, or you would have a backpack that has different functionalities, so it would be a gadget. You would have socks that are better designed for people that stay in planes. Those type of little incremental innovations that projects put forward, and they can only be justified in the crowdfunding text. So this is innovation. Innovation here, I mean simple things, simple ideas that show you did something different than the majority of players in the market. When it comes to sustainability, we're talking about using materials that are sustainable and willing to impact environmental concerns with that project. So, for example, you would have T-shirts whose textile is made out of uh, not trash, but how do you say that in English? Rejected waste. So you could have maybe uh, apparels or boots or shoes that are made out of rejected umbrellas. You would have a jacket that's made of umbrellas that people throw out in the streets, and you have no destination for it. So there's one brand that takes these umbrellas from the streets and creates clothing with it. This means you are reusing something that otherwise would have gone to waste and transforming it into a fashion project, a fashion product, exactly. Or pants that are impermeable using vinyl from tires. You know, that anything that has a component of circular economy involved, that the product will use things that otherwise would have gone to waste, but are reused in a new innovative idea. And this is also what we call innovativeness, when you make use of of an existing material that would have gone to waste and implement it in the product. And some crowdfunding projects related to fashion would make use of a lot of these interesting ideas, benchmarks, and innovative fashion apparel, um, because they saw there is a potential demand for it, and they needed initial money to start up their idea. So they literally only seen a possibility through crowdfunding to make it work. So this is about sustainability. Here I'm talking about literally environmental sustainability, the use of materials, textile components, elements that show circular economy, that show reuse of waste in different innovative ways. When it comes to life cycle, which is the third main aspect that we say fashion crowdfunding is important, it means that projects that are in the beginning of their life cycle are most likely to reach funding, to reach the target goal. By the beginning of the life cycle, we literally mean that this project hasn't been done yet. It's the first time it's online available. It's the first moment that potential consumers or pre-buyers would find it available. So really in the beginning of your project. And the reason for it is because when you have crowdfunding projects that are already very established, they don't get funding always, because it means that you would have found another way to fund the project without crowdfunding. You don't really need it. You're just doing it to gather momentum and marketing and branding. But it might not take off because crowdfunding community has a very moral component to, in which people want to support the things that make sense. So life cycle was in our study divided in three parts. One is the beginning, the middle, and the end. The end of the life cycle would be projects that are already very well developed, very well established. In the middle, you have a mid ground between I am not much of a beginner and I'm not much of a established. And in the beginning, we mean really beginners, early stage career, perhaps even amateurs, people that otherwise wouldn't have found funding to put forward their ideas. So, coming back to your question, what are the main factors? In fashion crowdfunding, it would be innovative ideas, it would be sustainability. So, showing to the consumer that you care about sustainability, especially environmental, and showing to the consumer that this is the beginning of a process, that you are starting up an idea and you need people to help you and chip in to, with you, make something nice. So that you give also consumers a reason to engage with your project, more than only funding, which is really important in crowdfunding. You need to give people a reason to take part in this project, not only for money.
Yeah, the powerful um, the powerful tool related to crowdfunding is the fact that you have a quite a direct connection with your audience, with your community. But this is also this could be also a way to. It's difficult to create this community. This is a challenge and a resource. So you need to
Yeah,
balance all your the communication that you use. But we will talk about communication a little bit later. Do you want to
yeah.
add something, please?
Regarding key factors, I just wanted to say that so innovative ideas, sustainability, and life cycle are about crowdfunding for fashion, right? But more generically, if you look at crowdfunding in general, not only fashion projects, some other important things matter as well. For example, transparency, though it's something that usually matters for crowdfunding projects. So putting the budget out there, showing how the money will be used, showing how what's the plan, when will you deliver? Is there a possibility that this will be delivered in time? So being transparent about the process is extremely important too. And but we can talk about communication and marketing a little bit further. This is a whole nother discussion, right? You just mentioned that one needs to have a community, one needs to um, create a community around the project, and this is the hardest part. This is, to be honest, the most difficult part to do in a crowdfunding project. But we can go back to this point, or we can look at it later, however you prefer.
We will touch this point in a few questions later.
Okay.
Um, your findings suggest that crowdfunding campaigns are more successful when they adhere to the values of the platform used. Could you elaborate on what those values are and why they are so crucial for success?
Right. Thank you for the question. So we observed this wasn't something we tested. This was something we observed anecdotal findings within our research project. We realized that you wouldn't find in platforms like Kickstarter or For the Kunst that are extremely focused on culture, creative industries, arts. You wouldn't find, for example, agricultural projects. You wouldn't find something really unconnected to what the platform offers. So, for example, a platform that focuses on creative sectors will not prosper agricultural products, and vice versa. Or a platform that serves as a self-selecting tool for creators to decide where they want to put their project on. So, for example, Kickstarter announced themselves as a platform for creators. Um, who are creators? We're talking here about creators in the cultural and creative sectors, with the arts, within fashion, within design, innovation. This means that creators, when they will decide which platform they choose to put an outlet for their crowdfunding project, they would choose the one that relates the most to their intentions. And this also means a moral reason, whereby um, I want to be associated with the platform that supports the cultural and creative sectors. I want to be associated with a platform that has helped the arts to thrive, which is also the case of For de Kunst in the Netherlands. So those values, they go beyond the funding per se, because um, it might be that this project would have been more successful in another platform, perhaps, but they would choose to go to the one that is related to cultural creative sectors because there's a community already there. It's a community of people that go back and forth the platform, that check new projects, that are involved in a circuit of creators. You can also get to know other projects. So it's very important to um, choose the outlet that resembles one's values and goals. Um, so let me give another example. Putting a cultural or creative project in a very generic platform means that you might not care that much about looking for a community of supporters. And when you pre-select The ones related to culture and creative sectors, you are pre-selecting also a community, so that is very important. Yeah, so Kickstarter had this appealing idea to talk to niches, talk to creators, to arts, and that has connected with the intentions of many entrepreneurs in those fields, because this is a field that often struggles to find funding and find money anyway. So there is a will to help as well, not only to raise money, and that's the end of the day, right? So basically, this is what we observed regarding values and the platforms.
So, when we need to choose our platform, we need to keep in mind the niche that is interesting in this kind of in the platform that we want to use, but we need also to consider the nationality, or better, the geographical area where this platform is more used. I mean, Kickstarter is an international platform, but
Yeah.
if we want to stay in our area, in our geographical area, like I'm Italian, so here in
Mm-hmm.
Italy, or
Mm-hmm.
in Latvia, or in Belgium, it is also something that we need to consider to be international or just national.
Yeah, definitely. The more local the project is, the better it is to stay in local platforms. And one of the reasons is language as well. It's not all countries that would have a widespread English speaking community, and we need to be careful with that. Usually, a project that would start in a local community would only go to Kickstarter or an international outlet later on in other stages of the project. But you start local usually. This is a better way to get in touch with the local community. So, for example, I would say, well, you want to create a theater project, better to make it local first, and then once it takes off, you can find an international community for it. When it comes to fashion, the same thing. Let's suppose you have a already thriving local brand, but you would like to reach some regional momentum, or even in the country. So going from the city to the country level, better to use a local national platform at first and test the grounds, test the waters, and then only move to an international platform. The reason here, I would say, is initially it's about language. Initially, it's about making sure people get your message across. And it might give a wrong message to start it with an international one for a very local product, because as I said before, you want to create a community around that, and to create a community around the project you need to start local.
Sure. And the difference, the step between the national level and the international level is not only related to shipping cost, trivially, isn't it?
No, no, it's not only related to shipping costs, because I mean, even if you use Kickstarter or Indiegogo, you're still producing it somewhere. It's still local in one way or another, and so you're always going to have shipping costs nonetheless. Um, so if you're producing it in south of Italy and you need to ship it to north of Italy, that's also shipping costs. Even if you use, it doesn't matter if you use a Kickstarter or if you use the local platform, you have those costs anyway. But I think here we're talking about the goals of the project, right? It's important for the entrepreneur, whoever that is, or whichever project, to find out in which step they are in the process. Are they in the really beginning? They still need to create a community around it. Do they need to find consumers first of all in their locality, or do they have passed this process already? If they have done this already, maybe they can move to an international platform. But if they haven't, I would not recommend it. Better start local, and not only for a matter of costs, but most importantly to gather momentum, because the crowdfunding community will usually be this community that can follow you, can go with you through your evolution, if you manage to do good idea, if you manage to come across to this local community in a nice way, right? So I would say it's important to focus on what the local people want and then only move onwards.
I just wanna ask another question related to the concept of price. One of the most surprising findings in your research is the positive correlation between crowdfunding success and the higher price
Yeah,
range of rewards.
yeah.
This contradicts the common assumption that lower priced the rewards and finding goals lead to more successful campaigns. Could you
Hmm.
explain why a higher price point might be beneficial in the context of fashion crowdfunding and how it relates to perception of quality, prestige, and exclusivity?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and I'm happy you brought it up because it's indeed rather surprising. Some research in crowdfunding has shown that the lower the average price of the reward, the better it is. Um, but in fashion, when we look specifically in fashion, we find that the higher price on average. So here we're talking about getting all the reward prices in all projects, constructing an average around that, and looking at if a higher or a lower average will bring more success. And we find that the higher average price will bring more success. Now, of course, we haven't interviewed people to know in detail their perceptions about prestige and quality in that sense, but what we suppose is that when you want to pre-buy, and the reason why I say pre-buy is because in crowdfunding you're announcing that you want to buy, and only then your money will be retrieved from your account. Only then the creator will receive money, right? So you pre-saying, look, I want to buy this whenever your project is finished. So when a crowdfunding supporter does that, we have to think in the heads of the donor, of the backer. I can go to a shop in the city center and buy clothing, buy apparel. I can go to an H&M, buy stuff, right? Buy apparel, buy clothing. I can go to a shopping mall and do the same thing. So why would you do that through crowdfunding? First of all, we suppose that there must be a reason other than simply buying a product, and it might be you want to support a brand that needs more money, so you are willing to give a little bit more, you're willing to contribute more to that project rather than just paying the lower fee, just donating for no reason. So you would be willing to give a little bit more of your time and money for that project. Therefore, you're contributing to this high price, high reward logic I was mentioning. And the other thing, it could be that I believe that crowdfunding, when crowdfunding has a high price, it signals prestige, that it might signal quality. And if you want to buy a fashion product on crowdfunding, you want this to be of higher quality. So you were already willing to pay more for an item of higher quality. This means creators will be more willing to sell products that are more costly to make. Because first of all, such projects are not produced in a huge economies of scale matter, like H&M, like C&A, right? Those are brands that produce in a huge economies of scale. It means the more you produce, the lower your price becomes and the less exclusive you are, because this is just uh, used by everybody. There's no particular difference, no particular taste, no particular prestige associated to it. But in crowdfunding, I suppose that there's one economic reason, which is simply your product is not an economies of scale one, because you're producing a difference, you're producing innovation, you're producing prestige. And on the side of the donor, the side of the support or the backer, that person is already willing to pay a little bit more too, because if it wasn't the case, I would just be going to a random shop in my city and buying anything. So there is a confluence of a creator that from an economic point of view has to charge a higher price, because this is not an economies of scale product. It's differentiated, highly differentiated, uh, perhaps even difficult to produce, costly, and in some cases very artisanal and crafty, because you have to make one each time. So that's very costly. The price goes high. On the side of the donor, you're also meeting people that are willing to pay a little bit more. And then you would have a confluence of high price, high reward, and people that are willing to signal their contribution, creators who are willing to signal prestige, and that would be a perfect confluence. So I think usually fashion brands that don't operate in a economies of scale manner, they need to find the sweet spot between exclusivity and access to people, because you also want people to access your product. So the price cannot be too high so that it won't be accessed by middle class, right?
Mhm.
Um, so let's not forget that one of the main reasons to do crowdfunding is to get outreach of larger audiences. And this can only be done if prices are not extremely high, right? Extremely high prices is not ideal. Extremely low prices is not a good idea. It's better to find this sweet spot between providing exclusivity, but still being able to reach people and
Mhm.
their disposable income.
Sure. So, seems like the magical tool for artisanal and people that work in craftsmanship. So, but you need to communicate. So, finally, let's discuss the topic of communication. You need to communicate effectively
Yeah.
to reach your community, and to also communicate the value behind your product.
Mm-hmm.
So, since effective communication is essential for engaging bakers, as we said,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
conveying the values of the campaign. However, your research indicates that certain elements, like the presence of a video and campaign length, don't significantly impact success. Why
Mm-hmm.
do you think these factors are less important compared to others, like innovation and sustainability?
Yes, here we're talking about video and presence of the video and campaign length. Um, when we mean campaign length, we're talking about the number of days the campaign has been online. And when we talk about video, is whether there is a video present or not present in the campaign. So we didn't find a correlation, sufficient correlation to point that out. Um, One thing is that our finding is more about we don't find sufficient grounds to affirm significant correlation, but they might still be important, not for the sake of bringing more money, or defining if the project will or not lead to success, but being important in the context of the campaign itself. So, what I mean here is that having a video and a campaign length can still contribute to bringing more money to the campaign, but it will not be the defining factor that brings success. Um, my view about this is that it's a very difficult thing to talk about, because reasons are mostly speculative, and I don't have a firm conclusion on why that happened necessarily. We needed to do more qualitative studies to investigate that too. But we suggest that, for example, when it comes to video, um, all campaigns will have a video. So we cannot even test the presence or absence of video makes any difference, because all of them have it anyway. What we need to investigate there is quality. It's the quality of the video and it's the clarity that it brings, which is something we haven't done in our study. Another study can pick up on what we've done and continue looking at, for example, the length of the video, the quality of the video, the characteristics, the aesthetic characteristics of the video, which is something we haven't done because also we're not equipped to evaluate on aesthetics ourselves in that research team. When it comes to length, we're talking about Becker's not concerned with whether this is a short or long campaign. And it may mean something very interesting for fashion, that if the project goes online and gets funded in 20 days, this is very fast. It means that we don't need longer, lengthy campaigns to reach money in fashion crowdfunding. We need shorter, concentrated times with an existing community and making a momentum in a shorter amount of time rather than extending a campaign for 2 months, for example. So it might mean something interesting for fashion crowdfunding is that those are campaigns that are very efficient. I think those are efficient campaigns that in a limited amount of time can reach decent success. Now, the presence of a video, I would say the issue here is more that video doesn't make that much of a difference in reaching or not the success. But the quality of it, the internal qualities of the video might make a difference. And this is exactly where we haven't gone further. So I would have to be very limited in my answer here in that sense.
And considering communication in general, did you notice any elements that is particularly useful and successful for the campaign?
For communication, yes. So when it comes to the text, when it comes to explaining the campaign project, we notice that it's important that the entrepreneur explains his story, that there is a storytelling involved in the campaign. And by that, I mean, where do you come from? Why are you doing this? Why is this important? How is this of any benefit to the world, even, right? Showing to consumers, and this is not only about showing, right? It's fundamentally a matter of authentically doing it. How does your project, how does your idea fit in the overall making the world a better place, right? Because this is sustainability at the end of the day. It's impacting in your little community or with your little project, something that could have a higher outcome. So also when it comes to video, but here I'm speaking mostly on the text, any form of communication, the entrepreneur has to portray a message, a positive message about its own project. How does it contribute to environmental sustainability? How can it contribute to socially engaging projects? Does it have any component that makes us live in a better world, for example? And I know those are views that perhaps are too big or too abstract, and not all projects do that. But as I said before, if I wanted to find a simple T-shirt without any interesting differentiation and interesting innovation, I would just go to a shop. I would just go to a shopping mall, and I would buy that myself. So I have to have a reason to go on a crowdfunding project and choose to support a project of a person I don't know that might get my money and also not deliver the product, right? So I have to believe and I have to trust that this is good. And I can only do that if there is a good storytelling, if there is good transparency of the budget, transparency about the doings of the project. Now, this is about the campaign. I want to also mention that doing offline communication strategies is very important. Online communication strategies, simply posting on social media, is not sufficient. You have to think of, for example, doing maybe a pop-up shop, maybe doing an event in a park, bringing your friends and acquaintances to see a prototype of your project, show it in person. Especially if there is a local component, you can totally do that locally, right? For international campaigns, that's more difficult because you cannot invite everyone to your backyard. But if we're talking about doing in a city, invite people to a park and say, look, we're doing an event, a pre-launch event to show a prototype of the product. We're going to do I don't know, a little festival. There is many different ways to gather momentum other than only online. My experience, and I've been looking into these projects for many years now, whenever there is also an offline component to communication, that works best, because people are also saturated with social media and it has become too much. So we need to gather momentum also in person. That's very difficult too.
And I think also it's useful to build trust, face-to-face relation. It's the best way to build trust, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's very hard to build trust online, and we know that.
Mhm.
But there are ways to do it. It's just very hard to earn people trust and attention online, especially in a moment that we are bombarded with online information left and right. So I it's actually a very good momentum to do local projects more than international ones. So projects that are concentrated in the region or has a local appeal, that use a local product or craft or a history, a tradition, something that, if you know that if you don't do something, it will disappear. Crowdfunding projects that also play on heritage are very extremely successful. So there is a lot of heritage when it comes to fashion. When you think of even Italy, for example, right? Italy is not the only one here, but looking at heritage and local significance is really important, and that brings a benefit in terms of communication, I believe, because you can gather momentum offline more than online. So yeah, I think it's actually a very interesting uh, moment to explore more local projects than international ones, and I would be really willing to see more of these local projects for future studies even.
We wish so.
Hopefully.
But it seems like a magical tool. But what challenges might it present compared to other funding methods?
Yeah, good question. So there is a few challenges. I think I would divide these challenges in first explaining that the entrepreneur has some challenges, especially if you're a beginner. So I mentioned that in fashion crowdfunding, the earlier life cycle, so the beginning of your career, the early stage career, uh, are most likely to get funding rather than if you're established brand, right? This means that if you're a beginner, you might underestimate the work. So we have noticed a lot of crowdfunding projects that where the creator underestimates all the managerial communication effort that is necessary. So they think, oh, it's only about putting a project online and waiting for people to put money in, and that's not it. So one of the main challenges is that the entrepreneur knows the amount of work that it takes, and it takes an enormous amount of communication work and managing. Underestimating the effort that is necessary to do communication marketing, I think it's one of the first I would mention. It's not only about putting a project online and waiting for people to donate. When you underestimate the work you have to do, you might incur in another problem, which is not delivering on time, right? So let's say your project is actually hugely successful, which has already happened in crowdfunding. Hugely successful, people contribute to it a lot, much more than the goal. that makes you underestimate the delivery plans, so that you don't deliver on time because you have just too much to do, too much work, and you're alone. That can happen, and that happens a lot in crowdfunding because we're talking about individual entrepreneurs usually. So this means that if you don't deliver on time, it might create a lot of criticisms online. So look, I donated to this crowdfunding project, but I haven't received it yet. That happened to me already. And you don't end up not receiving it or receiving it 1 year later. Well, that brings bad signaling to you. That brings bad signaling to this brand, which is exactly the opposite of what you wanted to do in the first place. So one thing that can be done is to calculate the actual capacity, production capacity. So let's say I'm able to produce 30 shirts. I'm able to produce 120 or 500, whatever that is, and put it in the crowdfunding campaign, make it transparent. Look, this is my capacity, and this is what I can produce until such dates. Therefore, you transparently show that you're aware of your limits too. And you can also say, this project will only take off if I have certain amount of purchases, certain amount of buyers, because if I don't have this enough, I won't succeed in this project. So underestimating the success, it's one challenge, or underestimating communication is another challenge. And I would say one challenge I often see is that people see in crowdfunding easy solution where it's not, and they put too high goals and extremely high expectations. One is an enormous target goal which will never be reached, and they want to cover the labor costs, their own labor input in the creation process. And I would say, for local projects, that's not possible. I don't think that's a good idea, because especially if a project is local, you cannot have enormous target goals. They have to have more reasonable target goals. Now, if that happens, you also cannot cover labor costs, right? So let's say I calculate that my hour value is 50 euros, hypothetically. Could be 30, could be 15, could be whatever that is, and I input these costs in the crowdfunding project costs, that would augment costs enormously. So that has just to complete my answer, that has a complicated consequence for crowdfunding, which is many crowdfunding projects don't include the labor costs. And that's a problem, because you're talking about projects where you have to work without knowing how you cover your own living expenses. In the arts, that's very common. Fashion, perhaps a little bit less. But in the culture and creative industries in general, it is a big problem, because we need to survive as human beings while we're also doing that. Bottom line, crowdfunding campaigns will work when you also have at least perhaps during those 2-3 months that campaign is happening, you have another source of income to support your own living expenses, and you don't depend on crowdfunding. You can't actually depend on crowdfunding only, especially if you're starting up, especially if you're a beginner. And I think this is where crowdfunding gets more complicated, right? Is that we're talking about people that perhaps have a disposable income to make it work, had some jobs before, and they are managing to run off their own salary still, have some initial investments that can help them cover the costs of their living expenses while doing this. I think this is one of the biggest challenges.
Thank you for this clear explanation. But there's still hope. There's still hope.
Oh no, there is still hope. It's just there is no tool that comes without hurdles, right? If you would come, as I said before, if you would go to a bank and you have no experience whatsoever, the bank will not give you any money either. So that won't work. Then let's say you want to go to venture capital. That maybe you don't have a good business idea yet. Venture capital will never give any money to investment. Well, then you're really left with crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is a wonderful tool, but you also have to be aware of its limitations, right?
Of course.
Mhm.
So let's imagine that we made it and our campaign was successful. Um, Now, what happens once crowdfunding campaign for fashion product is
Mhm.
successful? What are the key challenges in transitioning from a campaign-based model to a self-sustaining business? How can designers ensure that their brand continues to thrive financially after the initial funding?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have to say that at this point, I will be answering mostly on my impressions based on other studies and also based on communication I had with fashion entrepreneurs. But it's not a systematic qualitative study with them. But what I've noticed is that the transition becomes a matter of product placement a lot. So placing the product in good distribution channels. Some of them will make it entirely online business. So they would choose an online retailing model for the product. Others would choose more niche, so going for special boutiques, special brands, special shops, and place the product in a very niche context. So that is a brand strategies. What type of brand you want to make? You want to make a more niche brand, or you want to make a more general purpose brand? Uh, the challenge is one from a financial point of view, measuring the costs versus the rewards you will have, depending on each strategy you choose. And second, a strategy to transform that community of backers into future consumers. And that involves keeping the communication with backers, continuing to be in touch with them, send out updates, remarks, communication, not that frequent, but at least they can be kept in the loop. Invite them for an event, a launch event of that brand, for example, in a place where you will start distributing the brand. Let's suppose we're talking about bamboo socks, right? I'm using maybe a low key example here, but let's suppose we're talking about very nice, innovative bamboo socks that don't cut circulation and are great to go in the airplane. So that would have a brand, that would have a product placement, that would have a certain ideal price. And the challenge would be to transform this community of backers into long term consumers. And for that, you need to keep in contact with the community you have been in touch with and choose the best symbolic strategy for that brand. Will it become a niche brand for specialized people in a very uh, specific context, only for, let's say, runners, only for cyclists, only for sportsmanship? Or are we talking about a general purpose brand that can use online general retailing channels? Another challenge here we're talking about is it's the storytelling of the brand, because once it reaches more success and it becomes more established, you're not a beginner anymore, right? Then you're becoming established brand that has some local momentum, and with that comes all the challenges. Your storytelling is different. Your storytelling is not about, look, I need you to help me with a crowdfunding project. No, the storytelling becomes more of my brand is becoming more established, and now I want this community to continue being part of of this product, so that we can move on, right? So I would say that it's important to look into the storytelling a lot, the way in which you're going to connect with consumers, so that you don't lose them along the way. And what I also noticed, that as long as brands remain authentic to their idea, uh, let's say bringing tradition and heritage to fashion products, which is one potential dimension. As long as the brand continues to be authentic throughout time, um, the chances of this going wrong are very low. Then, in the matter of storytelling, this is important. Financially, I can't tell because it depends on each brand and each company to find their own perfect pricing strategy and their own perfect retailing strategy to reach more consumers. And that is something else my study hasn't done, unfortunately.
So there's no one solution for all. Anyone needs to find its own solution and its way
No,
to make it through.
exactly. I think it's really difficult to say there's one solution fitting it all. I think the solutions I mentioned, they they might not be the most concrete ones, but they would be the ones that I would see as important for crowdfunding in general, right? The storytelling, keeping the storytelling alive. Second, finding the best financial model. And by financial model, I mean pricing, retailing, price discrimination. Who will pay such price? Who will pay another price? What and third, the symbolic realm in which this brand lands. Is it niche? Is it general? Is it are you producing for economies of scale or are you producing for niche communities? So that will create completely different strategies for this business to survive. But like going back to your question was mostly about the transition. The transition is bringing your community of supporters to become customers. Um, and that involves more communication and marketing strategies. And they would depend on so many different things that I don't think I can give one size fits all answer.
Mhm. Of course. Um, we are reaching the conclusion of
Mm-hmm.
our chatting, our interview. One last question will be: from your findings, what advice would you give to emerging fashion brands or designers who want to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign, especially in terms of aligning their product with the values of the platform, but in general, any good advice that they can um, do to perform better?
Right. Perform better in crowdfunding projects. In crowdfunding. Okay. I think I wouldn't go that far from what I already said before, but very short. Authenticity. Authenticity is not only a matter of communicating a random storytelling or making up one. It has to be true and it has to be real and clear. So the storytelling associated with sustainability. It can be social, it can be environmental, it can be different forms of sustainability, but including that component in crowdfunding fashion is extremely important. It brings more success. And it's not only a matter of bringing more success to the campaign itself, it's bringing more success to your brand, which can make it last longer. um, Innovativeness, as I mentioned before. What is the innovative component this new fashion product is bringing to the world? Does it have anything different to show? Do I find this product elsewhere? What are my competitors? So those are things that have to be analyzed for you, whoever that wants to start a fashion crowdfunding campaign. You have to know who else is doing that you want to make, and how your product is actually innovative in any way. Is that because of a material? Is that because of your storytelling? Is that because of heritage? What are the elements? And so my suggestion here would be very clear, about what is this innovative component. And in fashion crowdfunding, when this innovative component is associated with materials, it tends to be also very successful. because we're talking about sustainability from a material point of view, right? Fashion, apparel, clothing, gadgets that you wear, and they signal something good. They signal something new, innovative, or sustainable. And third, try to get a grasp on who your potential backer is. Are they more concerned with sustainability? What age group? Where do they go? What is the sociability pattern they have? Try to find a grasp on who the consumer, potential future consumers will be, so that you are in touch with that. And one of the interesting ways to do that is when you're thinking about a crowdfunding project, whatever it is, fashion or not, talk to people and say, look, I have this prototype, and what do you think about it? Is it interesting? What is your opinion? You can make focus groups, for example. You can invite 3 4 people or more to discuss with you, potential consumers, to give you ideas if you are not very clear about what they like and what they don't. So I've seen some crowdfunding projects already doing this focus group strategy, which is creating a prototype, talking to people even before they put up a crowdfunding campaign. So that would allow them to find out information that is very valuable. It's like doing a mini research before putting up your plan, and take it very seriously. I see a lot of crowdfunding campaigns that are not taken seriously. They're just put online with a low target goal, which might become reached, but has no continuation, or is just too randomly made, not very serious. This is not ideal. This is not good for the brand that you want to build. So make it well done. Create a prototype, talk to people, find out who your consumer is, find out a perfect pricing strategy, put up the crowdfunding campaign, and think of your storytelling in a way that is compelling to people and also authentic.
Thank you. Many
You know,
interesting and useful tips
I
to keep
hope
in
so.
mind.
That those are many different things, but I hope it can bring some light to, yeah, different entrepreneurs. But I'm very happy to talk to anyone that would still like to have some inputs or ideas. My email, I hope you can make it available to
Sure.
people. So if they want to get in touch with me, they can email me, and I can yeah, I can have a chat if willing
Thank
to.
you. Of course, thank you. Do you think there are still other arguments that are important to underline related to this topic?
Another argument related to this topic. No, I think I said what are the most important things. I get maybe my last point will be that this is not a novel tool anymore, right? It's been in the market for approximately 20 years now. In some countries more, in other countries less. And we are now, I believe, in a moment that social media has become to many people very tiring. We have an overflood of news also through online platforms. There's too much information. So I think it's important for entrepreneurs here to think about their communication strategies more than ever, because to stand out among such noise, it's difficult. And that's why my argument of starting local perhaps works here best, because you need to bring this community along the way with you, and starting local is the best way, I find, because you can meet people, you can talk to them, you can have their feedback, transparency, and build trust, so that during the internationalization process, if that ever happens, this trustworthy community can follow you along the way. So my last remark would be, if you have a chance to try local, try local. Try, do a prototype, do a local pilot of that project, and only then think of international waters.
Thank you. I think this is also interesting because in a society where international brands are everywhere, going local is really disruptive by itself.
I think so, and this is where you can also find more interesting branding arguments, because people, I mean, it might be too much of a generic observation, but people want more and more authenticity, and this is a problem for economies of scale, because economies of scale, per definition, are not really authentic. You're producing in mass production, right? There's no customization. Are limited customization, so to reduce prices and reduce costs. Um, and there's nothing really new there, I find, in terms of producing something. But when you look at the local, bringing a local story, bringing a local heritage, a country or regional component, that has a lot of value for new generations too, and people that want to find more meaning in what they're doing. And if they have the means to buy products that have more meaning, because also they're more expensive, some of them are more expensive, well, then why not tap onto that environment, and think of opportunities to be sustainable in the niche, rather than being a hugely successful economies of scale brand. I think those are different strategies, right? I don't want, just a last remark, I don't want to mean here that there is one way to do things. I just want to mean that looking into crowdfunding has done more for niches than it has done for wide economies of scale brands. It's really usually not the place where you would find the generic brands. You would find the niche, special, prestige ones that are also not extremely expensive, but also not extremely cheap. So we're talking about a range of middle class consumers interested in purchasing meaning, and not only purchasing a shirt that everybody has.
Thank
Yeah.
you for this message. So,
So
thank you, Carolina, for your time, for your valuable insight, and see you in the next time. Thank you.
thank you very much, Simona, for the opportunity. I hope this message can help anyone out there. And again, please, whoever is there, feel free to get in touch with me. It was an enormous pleasure for me to be here and talk about these interesting topics. And I see you next time, hopefully, for another opportunity to talk about this again.
My pleasure.
Have a nice day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye bye.